What's going on, everybody? It's UTX JG the Don. Welcome to another episode of the Hardest Thing podcast. I already know what you're going to say. It's been a very long time since I've done the last video, but we are here now. Life changes. Everything is happening in the flash. We just got the Discord popping. So it's been a lot going on in my life. But I wanted to bring one of my very own from GI because, and I was literally just saying it right before we hit record. I have a lot of questions that I have not actually talked to Ethos about, and it's crazy because it's like, yeah, we've known each other for so long, but there's still a lot of things about this guy that I still don't know. But as we do every single time with this series, and what I want to do with this channel is I want to talk to people who inspire me. I want to talk to people who probably don't get to really tell their story on a regular basis. And of course, people who I talk to every day inspire me to do better with content creation and life in general. So let's introduce Gaming Ethos to the platform. What's going on, sir?
It's just Ethos now.
Oh, just Ethos. Just Ethos. Why'd you drop the gaming? Because you don't game as much?
Yeah, I don't game anymore. I'm a fake gamer now, so I've had to drop it. Twitter banned my game ethos. Oh, I'm just dev ethos or ethos now.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Yeah. So let's get into the beginnings of Ethos. Let's talk about when you first started gaming, and let's go all the way up until your YouTube days. And that's the days that we started actually gaming together and eventually doing business as a Game Illuminati. So what's your gaming story here?
Yeah, I kind of wish you had sent me these questions ahead of time, so I could have.
No, we gotta make a surprise.
Yeah, I wasn't ready for this. Dang, that goes a long time ago. So back when I was a wee little lad. So I'm a '90s kid. For people who don't know, so grew up in the '90s. Not like a lot of other people in GI are like. I don't think half of it. It's like what, like probably like 5 people in GI are older than me. I think so. I think I'm in the middle part of the age group. So, I think a lot of the older guys grew up in the 80s. So
Siggy, Nomad, Flog.
Yeah,
me.
And I think you, and then TBH he's barely older.
Yeah, TBH.
He doesn't count. But grew up in the 90s. My first interaction with video games that I can recall, I believe was, I think the first time that I actually like got into video games and owned my own was way back with the Game Boy Color. This was when Nintendo was like pushing to the West really heavily. You know, they added the color, they gave you different like purple Game Boy, blue Game Boy, see-through Game Boy, like all those selections, and it was definitely targeted at my age group at the time. I think I was no more than like 6, maybe 7. It might have been longer, but this is around the time, you know, Pokemon blue and yellow and red were hitting the West, and that was like my first, I guess that was the first time like I played other video games when I was younger. Probably I just don't remember when I was like over like friend's house or something like that. But that was the first time like I owned a game. Was my parents buying us Game Boy Colors out of a reseller, so a reselling shop. And I remember that my mom bought for me, I think it was for my birthday, she bought me a Pokemon Blue that was used. And I plugged it in, and yeah, that was my first experience was Pokemon Blue. Funny thing was that it was because it was used, it already had a save file on it. So the person who had it, I don't know who it was, but they had, I'll never forget, they had like a level 143 Kadabra. So I don't know how they did that. I think they cheated the game, did Game Shark or something to the game. But they had like all these Pokemon, already had Blastoise, already had like their full lineup, already beat the game. And I remember for the longest, I would start a new game, but I would never save because I didn't want to lose that person's like Pokemon, because they were just, to me, like I was just like, these are so awesome. So yeah, that was like my first, I guess, foray into gaming. From that point on, you know, my family, like I grew up kind of like middle class. So, you know, like we were able to get stuff, but you know, it wasn't like our parents were kind of, they kind of, you know, raised us right. Like they didn't want to spoil us and just say, oh, I want the latest and greatest. Like we never really got a brand new console like the year it came out. It was usually a year or 2, maybe 3 years after the console had already been in, you know, circulation. that we would end up picking up, like getting a console. I remember that we got a Sega Genesis, way past the point that Sega Genesis was even like new per se. But yeah, we had got a Sega Genesis, a Super Nintendo. I remember me and my brother, we would share them. So we would alternate machines with each other. We'd play, a little co-op together. That really is what I guess like brought about my love for like co-op games when I was younger, was me and my brother playing. We went through pretty much a lot of them. I'm thinking of all like the consoles and stuff like that. We went from that. Nintendo 64, that was the big one. That was the one where like friends in the neighborhood would come over and we'd be playing Smash Bros, Mario Kart, Diddy Kong Racing, 007, like, the whole 9 yards. And then from that point, then we had a PlayStation 1, but we had the smaller PlayStation 1, not the fat one. We had the smaller one.
Okay.
But ours was special because I remember we got it also from a retail store. That one came with I don't know if you knew, but some of the PlayStation ones had like the clamp, like a TV that was like hooked into the PlayStation, so it was mobile, so you could like plug it into the car and play it. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, we never actually plugged it into a TV. I think the whole time we had it, we would play it on the small ass screen. I played like Tekken a lot, and a lot of like game demos. I remember I never bought Final Fantasy VII. I played the demo disc of it, I think multiple times over and over and over again. Yeah, and then I think the last part of that point when I was like young, right before I started hitting the teenage years, was PlayStation 2. That Sonic Heroes. Oh my God, I played so much Sonic Heroes. You would have thought I was ace. I love Sonic Heroes to death. I played it. So we, me and my brother couldn't afford a memory card, so we kept our PlayStation 2 on.
All the electricity, boy.
Yo, and the worst part was like we didn't save our progress. We just kept our PlayStation 2 on. We would turn off the TV and then run down, try to beat it. I think when we were kids, we never beat Sonic Heroes because of that. Because like our PS2 sometimes would like turn off, or if the power went out randomly or something like that, then we would yell to the sky and have to redo it all over again. But a lot of my childhood was really dominated by a lot of like the handhelds. Like I played a lot of Game Boy, Nintendo stuff, Game Boy Advance, SP, a little bit of DS. I think by that point I was like more hardcore console. And also when me and my brother were around the ages of like, my brother's like 2 years younger than me. So I think by the time I was like 12, like 11, and my brother was like a little bit younger, right around that range, like 13, 14, in between that gap. We really got into PC. My dad was like already into technology and stuff, so he had like computers at home. So me and my brother with these like compact computers and Netscape computer for those who remember that way back. Was it Gate? The other one, Gateway.
Gateway. Yep.
Yeah. We had those old PCs. We played, me and my brother played Test Drive 6 on the PC. We played Nickelodeon Racing. World of Warcraft was a big amount of time. I think we played. Me and my brother, because my parents wouldn't buy the subscription. We couldn't afford WoW subscription. So we used to play on cracked servers back in the day. So it was like those servers that weren't the legitimate ones. It was people who, copied the files and made their own hosted servers. So me and my brother, we used to play on those pretty heavily. And then from that point, I mean, like once the, the modern age of gaming started to happen with like, I would argue with like, the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3, I was like an Xbox kid. I played 360. Didn't own an original Xbox. That was more of the PS2. But I, jumped over to the Xbox 360. That was where a lot of the, I guess, competitive side of me started to get born with, Gears of War. That whole thing was crazy. Me and my brother used to play Gears pretty like hardcore, and then I started to take a dive into more playing single player stuff, and my brother got into actually competitive Gears. Like he was playing that actually competitively, like what was it called, like Game Battles or something like that, and MLG, back when they had their website and whatever it was. So yeah, my brother used to do that pretty heavily, and he started to go into like CSGO and that sort of area of shooters, League of Legends, and then I was into single player. This is around the time where I played Mass Effect for the first time and fell in love with it. Mirror's Edge, a lot of those like single player games that came out on the 360. I played a lot of them, and I think the rest is really history. I think by that point I met you guys, I think a little bit before I think the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One had come out. I think we knew each other before that thing had come out fully. But that was pretty much like the TLDR of gaming that I had growing up till meeting you guys. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Extensive gaming journey.
My brain, I was trying to remember it. The timeline is so vast.
Yeah. I get it. It's a long time. So So what brought you into YouTube? What inspired you to start making YouTube videos initially?
Um, I don't remember. I'm trying to think hard. I'm trying to remember what inspired me to do this stuff. And I think maybe it was I used to watch. I think everybody used to watch the whole like Call of Duty commentary scene back in the day when it was like White Boy 7th Street, Wings of Redemption, and all the rest of them. Um, and I think it was. I guess it was just one of those things where it was like one day. I think a lot of people are that way. They watch and they're like, "Oh, I could totally do this. This is something I could do." And I think it was like that and a mix of like at the time I started to get interested in PC gaming back when I was like 13, 14, I think. Back around that time I was like interested in it. So I remember I used to watch people like it's kind of funny now, but I remember like back then I saw people's like gaming setup videos and stuff like that. And I would see these really cool PCs with RGBs and these cool inside, and I was like always like fascinated by it. Never had anything close to it, and I remember like it was like freshman year of high school. I was like set on like that was the thing I wanted to do. I wanted to build my own computer, and I remember I watched like a crap load of videos and stuff like that, and that's kind of what pushed me into that. I think once I got like my first gaming PC, it kind of that was the I guess the obstacle I needed before I was like, yeah, I want to do YouTube after that.
Okay, okay. And did you have an idea of what type of YouTube video that you wanted to do initially, or were you just kind of like, hey, like I'll just do whatever I'm interested in at this point?
Uh I think from the get go, I wanted to be a variety streamer, or not variety streamer, not a variety like video maker. I wasn't really set on like doing like one type of game, which is funny. A lot of people do that off rip, but like I was just like, I'm just gonna post and talk about and play and record whatever games like I'm playing and I like to do. Um, so I think I can't remember exactly. It was a long time ago, but there was a YouTuber, bigger YouTuber, way back Call of Duty. His name was Wicked Shrapnel, I think.
I remember him,
And
yeah.
yeah, so I remember a long time ago, he used to actually help small channels. He used to like let people community like send videos in, and he would like take some of the 5 best ones from that week, whatever it is, and he'd post them on his channel. And it would usually be a way to get subs. And I remember I submitted, and I think I made it. But like I did a video montage. I think that was like my first video as Gaming Ethos, long time ago. I did this video montage called I forgot the name. I think it was like called like This is Gaming Ethos or something like that. And it was just like just a stupid montage of a bunch of just random games. And I haven't seen that video in a long time, so I'm not sure. Pretty sure, yeah. I just remember at the end I did the most like corny thing. I like the corniest shit ever. I remember I at the end of the video I put on my like some shades and I was like it looks like a Game Ethos is open for business or something really stupid. I can't remember. It was something really corny. But as a kid, I was like, oh, this is so cool. But yeah, I think that was really what guided me at that point. I think that montage, it was just like I'm just gonna post whatever I wanted, and I think around that time Mass Effect 3 had dropped, so I was just doing like Mass Effect video, and Call of Duty was I think a majority of it was like Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, as much as I hated that game at the time. But yeah, it was like Modern Warfare 2, a little bit of Black Ops 2, I think was entering into the sphere at that point. And yeah, but that's all I can remember at least right now.
Interesting, interesting.
Yeah.
And that's definitely interesting that you mentioned video montages because I saw the shift in your channel. You started doing more music videos that were
Mm,
focused on gaming, and I saw your editing skills just kind of take another leap forward. So
mm,
let's talk about how you started transitioning from regular like commentary videos
right.
to montages to music videos featuring gaming, and then ultimately what I feel like was your peak in YouTube. You started doing video essays about gaming. That was like your like tippy top. I'm getting noticed. I'm on a trajectory up. Talk about that transition.
Yeah, so I think the gaming montage, I guess like trailer stuff started to happen a little bit around the time where I was starting to think about going to video essaying. It was kind of like a split where I wasn't sure of what I wanted to do. But I kind of was just I don't know. I kind of one day was just like, hey, here's a cool song. Fun thing. So I had a YouTube before Gaming Ethos that existed. And I think almost everybody yeah, maybe had that at one point where there was always like a beta YouTube channel that we had before then
Yeah.
we, became the real thing.
Hmm.
Um and I'm not gonna say what it is. If some people figure out or find out what it is, I think some of my old friends know what the name of that YouTube channel was. But Before that, I did two things. I used to do a bridge series, like with like anime
Ooh,
and stuff. Yeah, yeah.
okay.
There's some. I'm not gonna lie. Some of that stuff would definitely get me canceled now.
Oh
But it
boy.
was, yeah. It's some very old content. Nothing too crazy. Nothing too spicy. But it definitely was a hit. Pushed the envelope when I think to comedy. At the time, how people were back then compared to now. But that was when I was doing that and I was learning editing. That was what really kind of like informed my like capabilities of editing when it came to like timing, because I had to synchronize voices, and that's kind of like, and music had to be in the backdrop, and basically like editing an entire TV episode, if you will, like a 10-minute TV episode. And I think these kind of like inferred skills upon me that later on then applied into like movie editing was, I watched a lot of trailers, video game trailers, and I was like, oh, these are so cool. And I think just one day I just gave it a shot. I was just like, let me see what I could do. I always thought like the cool like E3 montage that we'd watch like from like our computers and TVs was really cool. And I was like, let me see if I could do something like that. And it kind of became a monster of its own. Like the first one I got, like I did, people like were very receptive to. It was like, oh, this is kind of awesome. And I noticed like people like were like really like it caught people's eyes, and they were telling me like that I might have like the eye for it. Um, and I kind of just went from there. It was just kind of just practice and reiteration. And I kind of always believe that in a past life I was a DJ or something like that, to that respect,
Mm.
because I usually have a pretty good sense of certain songs, like songs that I vibe with normally. And I'm just like, I can kind of imagine songs differently. When I hear them, I kind of can visualize what I can see, kind of like how all the TikTok editors are now,
Yeah.
or it's like the new evolution of this. But yeah, that's kind of like how it evolved. Into just doing regular like montages and then turning them into trailers. I kind of saw them as projects that I could potentially put on a portfolio or for like a resume or something like that. That's kind of what really motivated me to like keep trying to one up myself with every single one that I did, or I wanted to go outside of my comfort zone and do something that was like a little bit different. And then your second question was about the
The
like
video
the
essays, how did
video
it go
essay.
from yeah.
Um, that is a very good question, because I think it wasn't really like somebody inspired me. It was really kind of where I was at in my headspace. Like that was like I was kind of bored of just the regular commentary stuff. And I feel like at the time, like I was just doing the same old, like, you know what it was, like show some gameplay and voice over it. And I always like really liked games. I really loved talking about like them in full depth. And I could go on about Mass Effect forever. And so that kind of like was like kind of my inspiration to be like, okay, I'm gonna try to go. I think before I got into video essaying, I was kind of going into like opinionated content, which was not my glorious Potter years. This was the good old death of an industry era of me.
Yeah,
That,
of
in
that.
retrospect, I hate that. Like that version of me was the absolute worst. Like I think like that was probably the like I know some people like it or loved it as like a joke or enjoyed it at the time, but in retrospect, I think it's the most cringy of like all my time on YouTube. And it was just like there's just so much ignorance and just negative energy that I put out into the world, I think, around that time, that like in retrospect, like I kind of regretted. And I think video essaying was kind of the way that I balanced myself out, where it was just like, okay, there's definitely criticisms that I can do, but I think I can do this more responsibly, I guess, or more intelligently. So that's kind of like where the idea of coming up with a video essaying and writing it out. And at the time, like not to like toot my horn or try to act like, oh yeah, I'm that guy, but I think at the time, like it was like that was like the Wild West for that era, for that type of content. It was a Wild West. There were very few of us. I was probably like I'd argue I probably was one of the early grandfathers of that type of like YouTube essayist type of thing. Before it started to blow up, I would say like when I was doing it, it was really the side where like people hadn't seen a lot of that type of stuff before. And there was like definitely some people that exist. I remember the one person that noticed my content that I knew who they were. But it kind of put me kind of like not even on the map, but it kind of was like a confirmation to me um was what's his name? Ray Civic. He was doing essay commentaries around the same time that I was starting to do them too. And I remember he found my Rainbow Six Siege video, and he said I really like it, subscribe and stuff like that. And I watched his videos back, and I was like, oh my god, like this is a cool dude. I got to talk to him like years later, and we're actually like solid friends. But yeah, I think that's kind of like where I wanted to. I kind of wanted to go a different direction. I felt like all the negativity I did before that point was kind of like I was just done with it. I was just bored with it, and I kind of
Mm.
wanted to express more of like just my love for gaming that people say I have. So that's kind of what maybe enter into the whole essay era. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was literally about to mention then that I think that a lot of people probably did not notice, but yeah, during that time, I feel like you were one of the beginners in that specific niche. And
Yeah.
yeah, like you mentioned, there were only like a few people at that time, at least were blowing up around the same time as you were doing it, and they continued doing it, and you stopped. So let's get into the next question. Why did you ultimately stop doing video essays? Minus what you mentioned, because
Oh
you said that the
man.
death of an industry was kind of a negative point,
Yeah.
and we know the type of content that those certain type of people continue to do. So why did you ultimately stop doing video essays?
Uh I don't think I've ever told the people this. I think it's kind of, I guess you have exclusive, JG. I think it was twofold. Um, I think one half of it was I saw the essay community going into a place that I didn't like. I don't want to say like we got hijacked. I will say we got hijacked, but for those of y'all that remember, but around the time it was like 2016, 2017, 2017, 2018, I'd say around those 3 years. Um, I don't know if I should be shit talking, but certain entities had entered into the space. I sound like I'm gatekeeping too. But certain people entered into the space that uh, were entering into the gaming essay space, but they were bringing a lot of negativity to it. They were producing essays that were very clickbaity, they weren't even that in depth. They were just very high level, like just very high level overview. Like this is what the game was, and this is why it's trash, right? That's basically what the video kept to. Like, infamous stuff like, X game wasn't killed, it was murdered. You already know. I can keep going on. These type of videos when they started to infect YouTube. And I think one of the big parts was the reason why I grew and a bunch of other people grew at the time was because the algorithm was specifically targeting content that was longer than 10 minutes. That was that whole era.
Yep.
And our content was naturally fitted for that. That's why like a lot of our videos ended up hitting the waves. And I think some people saw that and they try to capitalize on that by, also adding additional um, controversial type of titles, or just ways that they could like expand the video, not really say much and just close it. And that was something that like I was disheartening to me, because I was like, this isn't something that I felt like the community originally started. Like that wasn't I felt like the purpose of what we were trying to do in this niche part of YouTube, video games, and it kind of turned into that, and it started to get a bad name for it. That was half of it, and then the other part was like, honestly, I was a little bit bored. Like it was just the same thing as before. Like you do something for X amount of years, and you can keep doing it for so long, but eventually at a point, you get tired of it, and your mind starts to go somewhere else, or you start to pick up something new or a new passion you want to develop and you want to go for it. For me, it was like game development. Like it felt like a natural progression. I kind of went from like, talking about games and playing games to talking about games to kind of like deep diving games. And I think from those years of me just like diving into games and really trying to understand like, why did I like this game or why did I not like this game? That kind of gave me more insight into then like, okay, well, I've basically gathered all this like knowledge and experience from just playing a boatload of games. Now, let me see if I can walk the walk and apply it towards, making one myself. And that's pretty much the gist of it.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah. You definitely hit the nail that it was a certain amount of people. And I remember we used to always post those videos in the chat
Block
and you used to
every
get so
time.
upset, bro. You used to
He
get
still
so
does this to
upset.
this
Yeah, it still
day.
does. He like, hey, it's your boy. But yeah, like it was a certain amount. It was like at least 2 or 3 big people now who
Yeah,
continue. It was like no matter what video that they put out, it was
they would
always
show up.
negative. Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
you literally cannot say anything positive about any game. Like you just
Mhm.
have to find something negative, and at that point, it was just on purpose. Like you were literally doing it because negativity sells. Negativity got you the views. You just wanted people to argue with you, and there was a certain community that just continue to feed into that negative content. I'm like, yeah, at that point, it's like, what are you truly doing? Do you like playing video games or not? Like that's how it
Right.
literally got. So that makes sense. And I had a feeling that that was, part of the reason why you stopped
Yeah.
doing that content. You didn't want to be associated with that. It's like if you continue making that negative content, that's not the type of time that you're on, then it's time to get out of the space. So that makes perfect sense. So you mentioned game dev. Let's just slide right on into it. So with you having a love for talking about video games, getting so in depth with video games, when did you start saying, "Hey, I want to make my own video game," and let's describe the process in which you got started, because I don't think a lot of people understand how one person comes from, or team comes from, "Hey, I have an idea of making a video game," to actually getting the tools and the resources to create the video.
Yeah. I've said that like one of the big, I guess, catalysts for what made me make the dive was, believe it or not, it was I'll never forget this. It was 2014, and it was Batman Arkham Knight. That when that game came out on PC, you know, it's funny now. The time I'm telling you, man. You know, the past repeats itself sometimes. Kind of like how everyone's mad about Jedi Survivor and you know, a bunch of the PC ports that have come out this year. Um, Batman Arkham Knight had the exact same problem on PC, or I'd argue it was worse.
Yeah.
But Batman Arkham Knight came out broken. Like no one could get the game to run more than 30 FPS. Like it was terrible, and it made a lot of people upset. And I had a whole death of the industry video of it. I went as far to also say that Nvidia was complacent with it, because they false advertised and said that, you know, with an Nvidia card it could reach 60 FPS. I went the whole 9 yards. And I remember that was the one point I think I was like seething at like gaming. Like I was just so mad about like gaming in general and just the industry and stuff like that. I was just like, one day I woke up and I was like, fuck it. If they can't do it, I'll do it myself. And with no experience, I was just like, yeah, these people don't know how to make good games no more. I'll show them. I'll do it myself. And I think that was kind of like, I guess, out of that arrogance, that's kind of what unfortunately sparked me to be like, I'm gonna make my own game. Da 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 da. It can't be that difficult. Came to find out, it was difficult. It was not easy. It's not easy. And so yeah, like that's kind of like what began and what started to spark. I guess that was a spark for the catalyst. So I started to develop, I guess, I'll just give like a TLDR of the timeline. I started to develop, well, to be complete, okay, to rewind. I had done some game dev stuff before then, long time ago. No one knows about it. Man, I'm giving you so many gems.
Yes, that's what we're here for.
So a long time ago, for people who don't know, this is going to be super rare. If you know about this, you know you're in touch. There was an online game engine called Beyond, Byond. I think it's still. I'm gonna just check really quick. I'm just like Googling it to see if it still exists. Oh, it does. Oh, wow. The website's not gone. Okay, cool. Yeah. So there was a website called Byond, Byond, and it was a place where you could play games. These were like kind of like nothing crazy. It wasn't like 3D games. They were like 2D games. 2D like looking down, like isometric type of games. And you could play games and you could also create them. And I think this was the first place where like I started to get like learn about game development. I made a couple of games on here. And now the thing about this that a lot of people didn't know was back in the day, this place was flooded, and I mean flooded, with Naruto games, Dragon Ball Z games, and they were online. So like they were like online multiplayer, like MMO style 2D games where players would play with each other, fight each other, like anime stuff. A lot of like anime like fans would get on here, play these games, or like RP and stuff like that on like certain like anime universes. Completely illegal, by the way. You know, taking a existing property and just making a game on buying, even if the idea we thought was like it's a fan game and it's free, so it's not illegal. But the thing was, if you didn't get permission from the person who owns the IP, which none of us did, yeah, like they would be forced to shut down. So at the time though, like this site was small, so like Bayern wasn't getting the attention of like big, you know, companies that like basically were using Naruto and stuff like that. But then I think so like a lot of us had come in and we were young, we didn't know better. So we all jumped in and we were just doing that. So I made like a Naruto game that was like a multiplayer game where you could like you'd be like create your own ninja, and you could pick a village that you'd be a part of, a clan from like the plethora of clans. Like it was very expansive, and you'd have the jutsus, like all the jutsus that were in the show were in the game. Like you could have Chidori, you could have, you know, the sand coffin, you could have all of it. And I had that game, and then I also made a Death Note role-playing game where people could like play like a role-playing version of Death Note, where somebody was L, someone was Kira, and it would be about the whole match would be trying to discover. It was like Among Us before Among Us even existed.
Oh.
Yeah, so yeah, I did that for like a couple of years, way back, like high school years. Didn't really know what I was doing. A lot of it was just basically like finding existing source code of games that had already come out on the platform that either got leaked, unfortunately, like someone had like basically leaked it, their source code, or someone had just given it away. I got my hands on it, and then I looked through the code, and that's how I learned how to do development. I saw existing work. I learned how the source code worked, and I just made changes to it until I figured out, oh, this is what this changes when I do this, that changes when I do that. And that's kind of where it evolved into, I guess, my curiosity about game development. And then moving into when I decided on like making my own game from scratch, like my own like universe and stuff like that. The first iteration of that was like around 2014, I think, 2014, 2015. And that was called Leap. And that was like just called Project Leap. And that was like a very early, there's some footage somewhere. It was like a 2D side scrolling multiplayer game, which is completely different. It's not even that far off, but it's different, obviously, from what exists today. But that was my first like attempt at it, and it was just like trying to build like some sort of like vertical slice, some sort of like little demo of this game. And it exists. It's probably somewhere on one of my old computers, but I'm pretty sure the game file still exists somewhere. It was run on, we built it on Unity, and then circa a couple of years later after that, we kind of I reconnected with a couple of like my friends from high school, and I was like, hey, I made this cool thing, and I'm thinking about potentially like what it could be, and they thought it was cool, and they were like, hey, like, have you thought about like doing all this sort of stuff? And I was like, yeah. So we actually came together and we founded a studio, basically, which is then Neo Interactive as you know it today. And then I think one of the biggest motivations, the reason why it changed into Samurai Zero was it was like 2016, was with like you and TBH when we went to Epic for Paragon. I think Paragon was a big influence on moving it to 3D. I think like when I was over there at Epic, basically Arctic at the time, he was basically like, oh yeah, I saw your game, it looks really cool. So have you thought about using Unreal Engine? I was like, at the time, Unreal Engine felt like this like AAA big boy type of engine, and I was like, well, I'm just using little Unity, I just little baby Unity. I don't want to, I'm too scared. Like at the time, like I didn't know anything about 3D graphics or something like that, and I didn't know anything about those pipelines or how it's supposed to work. So I was like, oh, 2D must be easier. So that was my assumption. Came to find out that wasn't true at all. They're both difficult in their own respects. But yeah, that's kind of like how it transformed from that point. And then, with Epic's support of like basically giving me a contact and introducing us to the engine, and me meeting some of the people when I was actually on their campus like 2 times, kind of made that decision. And then we jumped over to the Unreal Engine, and that's when we surprised everybody. We didn't tell anybody until we just dropped it randomly. It was like, oh, guess what, guys? It's 3D now, and it's like Samurai Zero. So it was always like a progression from, small thing to a little bit bigger into like what it is today, which is Samurai Zero.
See, that's super dope. See, I never knew that you already were messing around with video games. So
long time ago.
Yeah, I find it interesting. Like people's origin stories. See, that's the stuff that you never hear. Like, I know a lot of good web designers that they started off working with freaking MySpace and making pages for people, and now all of a sudden they know how to make web pages. They know about HTML and code and stuff like that. So you were already messing around with source code from other people, and you ended up making your own stuff. So you already had a little bit of experience coming into when you wanted to make your own game. Okay, and then Epic was the step to switch it all around. Okay, all right, that's very interesting. So where would you say the state is of Samurai Zero today?
So I'd say like Samurai Zero is at a point where basically we had successfully reached like a vertical slice form where we could show that off to publishers, and we basically had a fully playable game, which included like full-on multiplayer connection to multiple players, and a decent starting amount of content into the game, just so players could get an idea of like, this is the type of like experience that Samurai Zero is. So instead of me trying to explain it to people, like I could send them a demo and they could play it and be like, okay, I get it. I have an idea now visually with like my brain of like what's the vision for this game. And so like basically we've been at this point where, which is the fun part that a lot of people aren't aware of, but it's just the part of the constant pitching to publishers and negotiating with publishers and finding the right one. One thing that a lot of people aren't aware of is like, when you're on your own and you're not like part of like, your studio is not owned by like a Microsoft or owned by a Sony, right? There's really only 2 ways you do it. You either you self-publish, and that's only, let's be real, that only works if one, you're like loaded with money. So if you personally are loaded with a boatload of money that you can just fund it yourself and just get it out to the door. And then the second way is obviously when you need to expand or finish off the game, you find a publisher that can give you that additional funding to help you scale the game to like let it reach its full potential of what you think the game can be. Because the vertical slice isn't always like it's like a very short cut of like a polished version of what the full game will be like, but it's not the full game with all the content and all the additional stuff. It's just very bare bones, but it's like this is ideally what the game will feel like and look like to us. And then that's usually what publishers, base off of and decide on, like taking a shot in the dark on them, being like, oh yeah, this is what we want to do. But it goes both ways too. You don't want, a lot of like scare stories have happened because sometimes indie developers, like, they just become desperate, so they just jump at whatever first opportunity they have with a publisher, and then it ends up either them getting screwed, or like the game ending up having like a lot of problems, or the publisher interfering with the IP and turning the game into something that they originally didn't want to. That's why, you're starting to see it. You're not even starting. You see it currently in the AAA industry, where you're seeing a lot of these founders from like the guys who founded these studios that are now part of this big AAA umbrella, and they leave in the middle of development of some big project, because the publisher has just basically come in and basically has turned the vision of what they wanted, this said like project, that like their baby that they were working on, and they've turned it into some malgation that's not what they originally envisioned, and it becomes an impasse for them, where they're just like, I can't compromise on this, and they decide on leaving. And then they end up, usually at a different studio, or they make a brand new studio and they say, hey, we're the guys that did the actual original game that was really cool. We're the actual OGs. You've seen this multiple times with multiple releases recently of people doing that. So yeah, that's kind of like where like Samurai Zero's at right this time, is that like really like we are closing in. We're actually, I'm in the middle of right now, but we're closing in with a partner that we've had works with and we've talked with in the past. And unfortunately, like one other thing is just like sometimes like timing just isn't the best. Always, like, publishers are always looking for different types of games at different times based off of how the industry is. So, originally you'll come to a publisher at one date in time and be like, hey, we have this really cool game. And it could be a cool game. But if the publisher either A, isn't experienced with that type of game, or B, isn't interested, or C, doesn't feel like it fits their type of like portfolio that they're trying to build, they'll just decline and be like, hey, maybe not at this time. So a lot of it really just becomes like finding the right time and right place to squeeze in and re-interacting with people. So that's really like where we're at right now, is like we're basically on the cusp of getting the game where we have something very solid, and people who have played it have given really positive response to it and said, this is something I would love to play, and like its full version of it. And that's reassuring to us that we didn't just make a trash game. We didn't make a trash game, because it's like, why waste like hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on something when, if fundamentally it's not fun, what's the point? Like, you're just wasting money at that point. So yeah, that's basically like where we're at right now, is just like closing out on one of those basically deals and getting the game to be in the full vision of like what I've always wanted from the beginning.
Awesome. Well, I definitely hope that whatever partner that you end up choosing ends up being the right one. I want to see Samurai Zero come out. I know the current joke in GI lore is all Samurai Zero never coming out.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah,
it doesn't exist.
It's gonna be like
real.
Freaking the Chronic or something like Dr. Dre. Yeah. So but we've seen it. We've actually played it, so we know it exists.
It does exist.
It does exist. It does exist. So I can't wait.
It's a fully playable game.
I can't wait for it to come out. I want to see you. You recently did the OTK showcase. Shout out to them. They were able to showcase the game. That was a big moment. Everybody in GI was in attendance, so that was a super dope moment for you. I want to see you with like a PAX West or a PAX East showcasing the game. We were
supposed to last year. We were we were going to be last year. We were actually going to be doing that, and also we had like 3 different types of things that we were invited to, and Steam even has Steam Fest. Like Steam Fest invited us to do something for them, but we just felt at the time that like we weren't ready. Like we felt that the game in its current state wasn't at like that level yet, that we were ready to like, all right, we're ready for this big thing. But definitely believe, yes, like we definitely plan on with Samurai Zero is doing some more public stuff, especially after COVID. I think the other thing was COVID was still a big problem, but we feel like things are starting to get a lot better now. So all I'll say is don't be surprised if somewhere in the near future, down an event or two, you actually see me or see Samurai Zero poster somewhere. That's all I'll say for now.
Okay. Yeah, hey, like I said, if you go to PAX, any one of them, I'm showing up. If you're gonna be there, I want to be there too.
I'll let you know.
All right. So let's pivot over to the Game Illuminati. So let's talk about your first foray into GI. Back when we were just gaming as friends, just acquaintances and friends. And then transitioning into, hey, like we're going to make this a LLC. We're going to go to E3 Pact. We're going to be, media. Start doing articles. Let's talk about that. So, what was your start into GI?
Okay, thankfully I've told this story multiple times on stream, so I remember it. I remember the whole timeline exactly. So the beginning of it was, I remember, was TBH had liked one of my videos about, oh, I remember it was Call of Duty Ghosts. I was shitting on Call of Duty Ghosts because they were talking about dogs and destruction. I still shit on that game to this day. I'm sorry, I hate that game. That's a game I'll never give mercy towards. But I remember he liked the video, and the thing was, back then it mattered when people liked your video, because if people liked your video, it would not only end up in their subscribers' feeds. So if you were subscribed to TBH at the long time ago and he liked one of my videos, you could actually like see in your YouTube feed that he had liked my video. And that was a way that like likes were very important back on YouTube long time ago, because if someone liked it, that would expose their audience to you. And so he did that. And then also Twitter used to allow it where when you liked a video, it would tweet on your account and say, I like this video, and it would give an @ to the YouTuber, and then it would also show their link. And this was such a crucial, oh my God, I hate that it's gone now, but it was such a crucial community build. And then whoever was in charge of removing that functionality, it broke YouTube. And I feel like that was the era where like it just broke YouTube. Once they got rid of that stuff, I feel like just the community aspect and the way that like people could like expand their audience shrunk astronomically. But yeah, that's how the first time was TBH liked my video, and that was the first time I used to watch his videos as a fan a long time before, but I wasn't like a active person. I was just like, watch his video, oh, like this up. I used to watch his what was it, like his like dub videos and stuff like that, like way back,
Yeah, like Assassin's nigga and stuff like that. Yeah.
Nigga stuff. Yeah, I remember I used to watch those, and I was like, oh yeah, this is funny. This black dude. Oh yeah, subscribe. And then I think it was randomly one day on Twitter, I was just on Twitter and he had DM'd me, and I was like, what the fuck? And I was like, oh shit, like, kind of like, oh, that's surprising. I wasn't, expecting this at all. And he was like, yo, do you play Battlefield 3 on PC? And I was like, yeah, like at the time Battlefield 3 had come out. And I was like, yeah, I play that shit heavy. And he was like, yeah, I'm trying to play with some boys. You trying to play? Are you trying to pull up and play? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And then he invited me to good old Skype call. That was what we was using back in the day. Don't let them trick you otherwise. Try to act like we were doing anything else. But yeah, we were on a Skype call. And I think I'm trying to remember everybody that I met at that point. But I remember, I think that's when I met you, JG, because I think you were playing too. And Black, I remember Black was also playing around that time. That was when I met you three first, was through Battlefield 3. We were just playing Battlefield 3 casually, I think. And then I met everybody else within that same year, different weeks, us just playing different games, I think. But I think Battlefield 3 was the original, like, bring it together, guys, let's play some game.
That was the entry point, yeah.
That was the entry point, yeah. It was definitely Battlefield 3. That's why I love that game. Has a special place in my heart. Yeah.
True. Yeah, I love that. Especially the PC version, because that shit was
different.
It was like none other, man. Yeah.
Yeah, graphics and everything. Yeah,
definitely did. I remember there was a point, and we were going through a little bit of controversy between certain members who we no longer associate with, when we were trying to legit make this into a business. So this was around the time when me, TBH, and he who must not be named were doing the Game Illuminati podcast.
I mean, you can say it was Tick. Yeah.
All right, Tick.
Not like he's Voldemort.
Yeah, I don't know how people feel about me saying the name, but anyway, so we three were doing the podcast, and it came to a point where Tick was getting into it with people. He didn't like something that somebody said, and then ultimately he stopped associating with the majority of Game Illuminati. And then there was a point where we just weren't doing a podcast. The podcast was in limbo. And then I was like, well, I don't want this to die. Like, I feel like this could be something. So I was speaking to TBH. I'm like, bro, like, we got to bring it back. And so we were like, okay, well, who are we going to get as a third member? And it ended up being you. So did you ever even imagine that you would, quote unquote, be a podcaster now? Or were you just like, whatever, like, I'll just do it just because, I think it's fun, or because they asked me to do it?
Yeah, no, it was actually all part of my plan. Like, I was trying to get Tick out of there and not take his spot. No, I'm just kidding. No, I really didn't think twice about it. I think like I was always like I was listening to you guys originally when the podcast came out just to support. I was just like, yeah, so, that's my boys. I'm gonna watch the podcast. And I do remember like this was back before the whole meme of like, oh, everybody started a podcast and everybody who's like, who has nothing to do, like has nothing to do, they just start a podcast randomly. I've said this multiple times. It's like you got to understand like the era that the GI podcast came out was like it was one of the OGs. Like before everybody else said everybody started doing a podcast, stuff like that. Like GI was one of the first gaming podcasts, along with what was the other one? The one that Gamer Tag Radio.
Gamer Tag Radio, yes.
Yeah,
with
they
Paris
were
and
very
Danny
early.
Pena, yeah.
Yeah, they were doing it for I think a little bit before us, but it was them, and then we showed up in 2013. And I remember one of the funny things was, and what you were bringing up too about it was that a lot of people were like, "What the hell is this?" Like a lot of people were like not even into it. It was like, "I ain't gonna watch no 2-hour podcast video." I remember this. It was not like people were not receiving it initially. It would be like, no one wants to sit up here and listen to y'all talk for like an hour or two. And then as time went on, that seems to be a thing about GI, I think, in historically speaking, is that it seems to be a lot of things with us where we're like we trend set a lot of things where we're ahead of it, a lot of what the general audience accepts as like cool or worthwhile, and then everybody hops on a year or two after we've already been doing it. So yeah, I to be honest with you, like I if you had told me a long time ago I'd be a podcaster this long for a whole decade, I'd tell you no. I wouldn't believe you, but I think it's been rewarding and an amazing time, regardless. Especially like with you guys. I've lost track of how many episodes like we've done. I forgot what episode I started to jump in on. I remember it was challenging at first because of how, I guess, like what you said, like with controversy and how the vitriol, I think, of like people in the community at the time. I remember it was very hard of that transition of people to even get people to just accept me, whether it was like how they felt with Tick or just in general, because I think at the time, like I was definitely very opinionated about my opinions about stuff. And I think for a lot of people, they felt like I was very standoffish, or like I remember a lot of people try to say like I was like always trying to be extra, or trying to disagree with people, or for the sake of just doing it. And time tells all, and luck. Thankfully, I'm happy and I'm blessed that like a lot of people, like over time, it seems like that takes time, but I think over time people came to accept me, and they started to get used to me as time went on. We're just like, you know what, kind of like the whole like maybe we were too harsh on you, like maybe you weren't too bad after all. Like you have your moments here and there. But yeah, I think that's the gist of it that I can think of.
Yeah, we had to force feed pretty much our entire audience to even accept it. So that was the biggest hurdle in the beginning, which is force feeding people to want to watch or listen to a podcast. And we didn't even know what a podcast was. Like I didn't listen to a single podcast when we started. I didn't even know like what the genre was. We didn't really understand how people made money. So through time, we ended up figuring out and started treating the Game Illuminati podcast as an actual podcast, and that's when we got audio form. We started putting it on all DSPs because it was just on YouTube. Like I think like the first maybe 40-50 episodes.
The forbidden episode, the long one.
Yeah, they were all on YouTube. Long. So and they were all on TBH's channel as well. So then we ended up pivoting from that. So there were a lot of things we ended up changing from that. I remember when you came on, people thought that we were just yes men at the time. So we went through that phase. It was like, oh, you guys just agree with each other.
We just agree TBH, and that's all that matters.
Then it went from we're just super pro PC and we just hate consoles.
Oh, the PC elitist era was insane. Yeah, that was insane.
Yeah, PC elitist era was very interesting. But again, through time, people were like, oh, you guys are right. Again, it just always yes, it just always happens. So it's
crazy how that's a pattern with us, like every single time.
That's a pattern. It's like people start doubting us at first, like, oh, this is never gonna work, I hate this, and then eventually give them a little bit of time, they'll come around. So like I said, I don't even trip. No, like I don't read YouTube comments. I remember one thing that we stopped in our mental just
don't, like, I'm telling you, man, that like the podcast the first year I think stressed me the fuck out, because I remember I used to argue in the comments with every fucking person that would like say some nasty shit about me. I'd be like, I would waste so much energy on that shit. And then like finally, like I guess I just grew, I got old enough, and it just woke up one day. I was like, I'm done. Like I don't owe these people anything. If they don't like me, fuck them. Like, I don't give a
Yeah.
shit anymore.
Yeah.
And I just said, I don't give a shit anymore. So I was like, all right, if y'all gonna keep saying stupid shit and stuff like that, I'm done like trying to give my energy and just get a migraine over reading this shit and try to be active in the comments. I was like, fuck that shit. And I just never looked at the comments. And like to this day, like I don't ever go to any of the podcast stuff and I look in the comments at all. Like the only time I find out about stuff in the podcast is either TBH tells me or you tell me or somebody
Mhm.
else. Like I don't actively go in there. I don't, if people are there and they are saying nice things about me, I do appreciate it. I'm pretty sure there's still people who still try to shit on me. It is what it is. But there are some very nice people that I've met also through like just YouTube and just the Twitch and just the community in general. And I think it's been worth it through all the terrible shit that I and like just GI has gone through though. I think it was worth it in the long run of things.
Yeah.
Where we are today. So
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So let's get off of gaming, YouTube, podcasting. Let's talk about Ethos's favorite pastimes. Outside
jeez.
of video games, what does Ethos like to do when he has time off?
No, nothing, bro. I live and breathe this gaming shit. That's all I do. I inject that shit in my veins. No, I've been trying to diversify off of it because I feel like a lot of my life, especially in the early 20s, was like it was video games was the main thing. Like it was like I really wasn't doing anything outside of that. The only few things that I would do outside of that was I used to fence and do track and field back in high school. Did a little bit of like track and field, like a little bit like intramural style, nothing like competitively. But fencing, like I was like in college and stuff like that, and I really did enjoy that. Unfortunately, I just didn't have enough time for it, but it's definitely something that I've always thought about like going back to. That I found out I had a natural talent for that I didn't even know I had, but like I was like a freshman in college who just intramural, like it was an intramural experience. Like, you want to learn how to do fencing? Well, come on, the fencing team will teach you. And I was like, oh yeah, shit, I want to smack people with a sword and not get in trouble for it. Why not? And I remember I did it, and it was like it was rewarding. It was like the first time I was like, wow, this is really fun. And like some people had saw some of the upperclassmen basically kind of took me under their wing as like a protege and was like, I remember this one girl, she was like upper class. She was like, you. I was like, what? I was like, like, you're going to be my protege. Like, I'm going to make sure, like, because like I'm a junior, I'll be gone in 2 years. I'm going to make sure that, you're going to be my new like replacement basically. And I remember she was like training me a lot because they basically said I was really good for saber, which is like aggressive. It's like a longer blade, more aggressive. Like you can actually hit your opponent. You can like wail on your opponent. A lot of the other ones like epee, they're more like finessing and trying to just like little light taps and stuff like that. Saber is more like, I'm actually
Okay.
gonna like try to like knock you out here. Try to like actually like land your hits and stuff like that. So that was definitely something that I really enjoyed. It's something that I definitely want to return to. Recently, actually, this past year, I've been getting into a little bit of like trading card games and stuff like that. I've been obsessed with Magic the Gathering's Commander format. I really love it because it's the first card game I've ever played where it's 4 players. So you have 4 players who sit down, they play against each other with their own decks. But the thing I love about it is it's a very social type of game. There's a lot of politicking in the game. So you can make deals with other players and say, hey, like, if you help me by taking this card off the field or destroying this creature, then I'll help you out here or something like that. And you can make these deals and you can talk. And normally when you play like any other card games, that's like, no, you can't do that. It reminds me a lot of like the social contract when you play spades. That's kind of why I think I gravitate towards it. It's like,
Mm.
where you have to work with your partner and you have to communicate. It's like that too, but it's always shifting. It's technically a battle royale where every person is trying to win, but at certain times, certain people can get an advantage and become like arch enemy, like the most powerful person at the table. And then all the other people need to like, hey, okay, we need to truce and we need to work together to stop this person because they're about to win the game if we don't stop them. So there's really cool like social dynamics to the game that I love. It feels kind of like a little bit like Death Note. It's really a fun. And I do highly recommend it if anyone who is watching likes card games or has never played it to like at least like watch a video of it from like a show of it that they do on YouTube really well. It's called Game Nights. They do a great job showing it with like cool presentation and stuff. But it's a really fun format. I really enjoy it. I've been playing it for like about a year now. And yeah, about a year now, and it eats up a lot of like the little bit of free time that I have outside of like game deving and stuff like that. That I do spend, and I meet cool people, and thank God they're not as smelly as Smash Bros players, so it's not bad. But yeah,
Interesting, because I
yeah.
always thought that Magic was just one on one. But how long has this format been around? Is it sort of
Oh,
new, or is it?
so it was around for a while, but it for some reason it gained popularity in 2018. From what I've read, I wasn't around when this happened, but it gained popularity in 2018, 2019. And then it became more popular when the pandemic had happened, because then they made like a remote, like virtual type of way to do it. And the main format that people were playing with that virtual form was Commander. And it just took over basically Magic. I think right now I think out of all of it, I think Commander's the most popular game mode out of all. Like if you ask a Magic player, hey, you want to play? Most of them are going to say I play Commander. A lot of like their standard format, their regular like 1v1, it's kind of dead because they released that video game version, the online version that you can play Arena.
Hmm.
So that's usually where they all went. They all went to the digital because it's way more, it's ease of access. I ain't got to drive over to a store and play in person. I could just plug in my iPad and just play it directly like that. So the only thing that hasn't been digitized has been Commander. So that seems to be the paper format that everyone's still like playing and enjoying.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Very interesting. All right.
Yeah.
Final question for Ethos. For someone
Yes.
who may be watching this video and they're interested in game development,
hmm
what advice would you give them if they want to get started?
Uh, Honestly, start today. Just do it. I think a lot of people are just scared of it off rip. I know I was of just like how overwhelming it might be. But like there is a lot of free resources. You don't need to go to college. You don't need to like you definitely can. I'm not telling you not to do that. If you are like getting out of high school and you want to do this, like go for it. But if let's say you're like me, like you pass out of high school and college and stuff like that, and you kind of thought at the time it was kind of like a joke type of thing and it wasn't really serious. Um, or you couldn't convince your parents that it was like a serious type of thing, like esports now. And so now like you can just download it. Like Unreal Engine is completely free now. You can download the engine for absolutely nothing and you can just learn how to do it. They have a boatload of resources. The community is very open and they're very helpful. There's more than a dozen samples, and my God, there's so many like game development YouTubers that exist who have whole like 60-part video like tutorials, like showing you step by step how to make like a Dark Souls type game, or make a this type of game, or make a platform type game. So and just start small. That was one mistake I made where I try to go large immediately. Start small when you're starting off. Like just try to do a basic thing. Try to get a character into a game engine and allow him to run around. Then try to make something where like he can jump, and then try to expand where like I'm gonna make a platforming game like a Sonic type of game, or I'm gonna make a Mario type game. Like just start small and build like fundamental blocks, and then over time as you feel more confident, you're getting better and better and better at it, then you can expand, and then you can go for the big boys. So, like don't go into it and think I'm gonna make Dark Souls the next Elden Ring. Like don't go into it, and God for God's sake, don't go into it thinking you're gonna make the next MMO. Don't, like, start small. That's why a lot of indie games are like very simple, like 2D platformers or something like that, because they start small. Like pick something small, pick something that manageable, and just like don't think you have to get it all done in like one day, 1 month, 1 week, 1 year. Like just pace yourself and schedule yourself and just say, hey, I'm gonna do this amount, this little bit of time. I'm gonna do this amount, this bit of time. And before you know it, like you'll just do a little bit here, a little bit there every single week. That like in a year or two, you'll be like, oh my God, like I actually have something done, something physically that I can release to the world. And I promise you, it's one of the most rewarding things in the world. Just creating something from nothing with your own two hands is something that I feel is like one of the most rewarding things you can ever do in the world. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. This has been a great conversation. I knew I would get something out of you. I'm glad I
There
got
you
some
go.
exclusives.
There you go. You didn't have to torture me for it.
I know, right? I know. All right, yo. This has been the latest episode of the Hardest Thing podcast. Ethos, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Dev Ethos, right? Because my other one got banned. Thanks, Twitter. For no good reason. And then if you do need to reach out to me for any business reasons or whatever reason, you can email me at marlo@samurai0.com. That's like my business email. So if you have any questions about like game deving stuff or specifically Samurai Zero, press or development or something like that, you can send an email there. I'm usually very responsive on that email. But yeah, just find me on Twitter. That's mostly where I hang out. I also do Twitch every once in a while in a blue moon. You get a rare Ethos stream. That one's my old name, Gaming Ethos, so you can find me there. And YouTube, when I in a blue moon decide on uploading on it, I try to upload. I uploaded 2 things this year, 3 things this year. So maybe I'll upload a fourth and fifth this year. Who knows? That's on. I think if you just search Gaming Ethos, I'll pop up, or Ethos or whatever. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Dope, dope. All right, guys. Until next time, when I have another amazing person who inspires me to interview, we'll be back. Hopefully, it won't take too much longer this time. But, like I said, life happens. So I appreciate you all for watching and listening, and I'll see you next time. Peace.